Okay, first we're going to need something to walk on, so right click, 3D object, and plane. And that's really hard on the eyes, so let's create a material to change the color. Right click, create, and material. And I'm going to name that floor. Okay, next let's switch the map of that. So go up here and click on the albedo map, and I'm going to just use the default checkerboard, which comes with Unity. Also going to change the tiling to 5x5, and we're going to drag that onto the floor there, and there we go. And now we have something for our character to walk on. Alright, now we need an actual character model for our scene. If you guys don't have one, I will provide one in the description. I'm actually using one from Polygon, so I cannot share that one unfortunately because it is a paid asset. So just import your character model. Just going to give it a second for it to load. Alright, let's try to make things a bit more neat. We're going to rename this plane to floor so we know it's a floor. Okay, floor. Awesome. Now let's right click here, create empty, and we're going to name this empty object player. This is what we're going to place the player's model under. So once that's done, let's go down here to your player model folder, wherever you have it, and drag the model into that empty game object. So it's parented under it. Awesome. Now we have everything in the scene needed to make a character move around. So now we get to the fun part. We're going to start scripting. So right click, create, C# script. We're going to call this first one player locomotion. And after that, right click, create, C# script. We're going to call this one input handler. These will be the two scripts that allow your player to move around. Before we go to scripting though, we're going to go to Window and Package Manager, and we're going to install Unity's input system. If you don't see this here, you're going to need to go up and click the advanced bar up here, and then click Show Preview Packages. Once you have that done, just click the input system and hit install. It's going to prompt you with a question about backends. Just click yes, and then after it's done installing, make sure you reset Unity. I repeat, after it has installed, make sure you reset Unity and reload your project. Alright, I'm going to drag this up here so you can see the screen. Right click, create, and then we're going to hit input actions. Okay, we're going to call this player controls. This will control the input of our controller. So once we do that, we're going to come up here to the top right, and we're going to hit generate C# class and apply. Again, don't worry about all this if you don't understand it, because this is just Unity's input system. If you want to read more about it, you can, but once this is set up, it's good to go. So we're going to double click on the player controls here, and that's going to prompt this window, and we're going to make an action map. We're going to call it player space movement. Okay? We're going to hit this new action here. We're going to call this movement. We're going to change the action type to pass through and the control type to a vector 2. We're going to delete this binding here. Right click, delete, and we're going to make a new one of a vector 2 composite. We're going to call it WASD, and then we're going to set up as analog, and we're going to put the up key as W on the keyboard, the down key as, you guessed it, S on the keyboard, the left key as A on the keyboard, the right key as D on the keyboard, and then we're going to add a new action. We're going to call this camera. We're going to go down here and make this right stick. You're going to look for right stick gamepad. Just right stick gamepad. There we go. Perfect. We're going to add a processor for a stick dead zone. And then we're going to go and we're going to add a binding. And we're going to use this for mouse delta. Right here. We're going to add a normalized vector 2 process. And once that's done, you can close it out and hit save. I won't go into Unity's new input system in this video because it's not something you need to understand internally. It's just something you need to know how to set up, because once it's set up, it's there and that's it. If you want more information on it, you can check out the documentation, or if you request it, I can make a video on it. Okay, let's go to Edit, Project Settings, and then we're going to click on Input Systems Package and click Create Settings Asset. This basically creates the asset that allows us to edit some of the input settings. We're going to change default hold time to 0 because this will take off any delay when moving around our character. You're going to see too, it's going to create a little file here in the assets called Input Systems.Input Settings. Next, hit our player game object and click Add Component and search for Capsule Collider. Add that. I'm just going to zoom in here so I can see it. I'm going to drop down the menu and I'm going to put that up at 1, 0.5, and 2. Actually, we're going to put it at 0.3. Then we're going to add a component. We're going to add a rigid body. Open that up. I'm going to freeze rotation on X, Y, and Z because we want to handle it ourselves. And now we're going to start scripting. Okay, first we're going to get rid of all this because we don't really need it. We're going to start by encapsulating our code in a namespace. I'm going to use namespace SG for Sebastian Graves. You can use whatever you want. It's not really that important what you call it. Next, we're going to start by writing out public float horizontal, public float vertical, public float move amount, public float mouse x, public float mouse y. Next, we're going to make player controls. We're going to call it input actions. That's just the player controls we made earlier. Then we're going to make a vector 2 and call it movement input. Then we're going to make another vector 2 and we're going to call it camera input. Okay, next we're going to make a public void on enable. So whenever this is enabled, if input actions equals null, input actions equals new player controls. So if there's no input actions, then input actions equals new player controls. Input actions dot player movement dot performed plus equals input actions equals greater than movement input equals input, oh, wrong input, lowercase input actions dot read value vector 2. Okay. Input actions dot player movement dot camera dot performs plus equals I equals greater camera input equals I dot read value vector 2. Awesome. Okay. Lastly, input actions dot enable. There we go. We're going to save that. Private void on disable now. This one's pretty straightforward. Input actions dot disable. Public void tick input float delta. So we're going to have to pass the float. First, private void move input float delta. Horizontal equals movement input dot x. Vertical equals movement input dot y. Spelled vertical wrong. Whoops. Vertical. No, vertical. There we go. Move amount equals mathf dot clamp 01 mathf dot abs, and we're going to use horizontal and take a guess plus mathf dot abs vertical. Mouse x equals camera input dot x mouse y equals camera input dot y. Save. And then on the public void tick input, we just do move input and pass the delta. Minimize that. Now we go to our player locomotion scripts and open that up. We can get rid of this again, but just the lines up here. Actually going to use start, namespace, SG like before, wherever you call your namespace. First, we're going to put down a transform and call it camera object. Next, we're going to use input handler, call that input handler, because we're going to call upon the input handler for a few things. Next, we have a vector 3, move direction. We're going to hide this in the inspector. We're going to put public transform, my transform. I'm going to do public new rigid body. Public game object normal camera. I say normal camera because later there will be a lock-on camera because this is Souls-like. Header stats. So we're going to control some things here like our movement speed, etc. Serialized field. Float. Movement speed equals, we'll start off at 5. Serialized field. Float. Rotation speed equals 10. Souls is very fast rotation. Rigid body equals get component rigid body. I'll call it on start. Input handler equals get component input handler. And our camera object is going to equal, not subtract, camera dot main dot transform. My transform will equal transform, just the transform of the scripts. Check my notes here, okay. Alright, let's make a region. We're going to call this movement. Keep it neat and tidy. Vector 3, normal vector. That's going to make sense soon. I know that name is a bit ambiguous. Vector 3, target position. Then we're going to do a private void handle rotation. This is going to handle the actual rotation of our character. We're going to have to pass a float delta. Inside here, vector 3, target direction equals vector 3 dot 0. Then we're going to have a float for move override equals input handler dot move amount. Target direction equals camera object dot forward times input handler dot vertical. Our target direction plus equals camera object dot right times input handler dot horizontal. Target direction dot normalize. Make sure you normalize it. target direction dot y equals 0, because you don't want any movement on your y. If target direction is equal vector 3 dot 0, then we're gonna just target direction equals my transform dot forward. Float rs rotation speed equals rotation speed quaternion tr equal quaternion dot look rotation. Target direction, tr stands for target rotation, by the way. Quaternion target rotation, oh, not rotation, rotation, goodness, equals quaternion dot slurp between my transform dot rotation and target rotation speed times delta. My transform dot rotation equals target rotation. Awesome. Perfect. Now we're going to save that. Make sure everything's done correctly. Yes, okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Alright, let's minimize that there so it's a bit more clean. And now we're going to do our update method. So we're going to make public void update. First thing you want to do is float delta equals time dot delta time. Then we're going to do input handler dot stick input and pass the delta. There we go. See how it's starting to come together now? Next, we're going to do move direction equals camera object dot forward times input handler dot vertical, and also move direction plus equals camera object dot right times input handler dot horizontal, for those of you who are yelling at the screen right now, and then move direction dot normalize. Don't forget to normalize. Excellent. Okay. Now we're going to do a float speed equals movement speed, and then we're going to do move direction times equals speed. Then vector 3 projected velocity, spell it right though, equals vector 3 dot project on a plane. We're going to do our move direction with our normal vector. Rigid body dot velocity equals projected velocity. And if I do recall, I think we're good to go. So save. Now we're going to test this out and see if we actually can move around. So let's go and hit play. Oh, but first we actually have to drag the scripts onto our player. So click on your player, and on top of the player's game object, drop in input handler and player locomotion. And then hit play. And we have movement. Awesome. Okay, it doesn't rotate because we forgot to call the handle rotations on update, which is fine. But look at that. We're moving around. That's a giant first step in the right direction. Give yourself a pat on the back. Awesome. You're probably sitting there saying, but Sebastian, how is this thing going to animate? Well, we're going to create one more script. We're going to call it animator handler. This will be the last script of the video. This is going to handle our animations, doing exactly what it says. We're going to open this up and go back into Visual Studio, and we're going to get rid of this stuff because we don't need it again. We're going to start with our namespace. Mine is going to be namespace SG, Sebastian Graves, as usual. Yours is whatever you want it to be. And then we're going to check my notes here. And we're going to go and start off by putting down a public animator. We're going to call it anim. Okay? We're going to then go to an int and make it vertical. And then we're going to place an int and call it horizontal. All right. So then we're going to make a public bool, and we're going to say can rotate. So this is going to allow us, or not allow us, to rotate while we move. Then we're going to make a public void. We're going to call this initialize. Be careful, it doesn't auto place that. Just want to call initialize. Basically means when this thing, starts up. We're going to say anim equal get component, and we're going to call on the animator. Perfect. Vertical is going to equal animator dot string to hash vertical. Horizontal equals animator dot string to hash horizontal. Public void update animator values, and we're going to pass float vertical movements and float horizontal movement. All right, now let's make a region for the vertical. Keep it very neat. Float v equals 0. If vertical movement is greater than 0 and vertical movement is less than 0.55 f, b equals 0.5 f. I'm basically doing this to clamp the values. This makes it more Souls-like. Else, if vertical movement is greater than 0.55 f, b equals 1. Else, if vertical movement is less than 0 and vertical movement is greater than minus 0.55 f, b equals minus 0.05 f. Else, if vertical movement is less than minus 0.55 f, I think you know what's coming now, v equals minus 1. Else v equals 0. And now we repeat this whole process again for horizontal. Make a region, horizontal. Float h equals 0. Like I said, it's going to be the exact same thing, but for horizontal values. I just want to take a moment now while we're repeating these steps to talk about this tutorial series. This tutorial series is targeted at intermediate level Unity users and C# users, but if you are new to Unity and C#, it's fine if you want to follow this tutorial too. You can do it. I just recommend you watch the video a couple of times to fully grasp the concepts I'm talking about here. If anything in the video is unclear, such as my naming conventions or the purpose of certain functions in my scripts, just ask and I will do my best to explain them to you. You can contact me via YouTube comments or an email. Like I said, if anything I'm doing confuses you, ask questions. I love answering people. It's always better to ask if you're unsure, because better safe than sorry. For Patreon users and supporters, I will have a Discord that you can join to personally ask me questions, as well as other people in the chat. I also have the source code available for download for Patreon backers. You can use the source code to cross-reference your code to check for any mistakes, whether it be better to help you to learn the material, or you can use it in your own project. Okay, now that that's done, now we're going to go to anim.setFloat vertical b 0.1f time.delta time. anim.setFloat horizontal h 0.1f time dot delta time. Let's minimize this. Public void can rotate equal true. Public void stop rotation. Can rotate equal false. Save. Go back to your player locomotion script. Up to the top here, we're going to add something in. So we're going to go hide inspector, public animator handler. Then we're going to come out to our start function, and on start, we're going to say animator handler equal get component in children animator handler. Handler. There we go. It's in children because we're putting this on the player model under the player game object. If animator handler dot can rotate, handle rotation. Pass the delta. Now our character will rotate. Okay. Next we're going to say animator handler dot initialize. So on the start it actually loads everything up, and we're going to save it. Now then, let's go to our player, drop it down, click on the actual model itself, and drag the animator handler script. Then we're going to tick can rotate, and we're going to start the game. And now when we move around, we should be able to rotate. Yes, now we're rotating. Awesome. Hell yeah. If you made it this far, give yourself a pat on the back. Good job. Okay, and now we have to actually animate this character, so when we walk, it walks, and we run, it runs. So we're going to drag in the animations into our assets down here, and we're going to start plugging the animations in. But first, we need to right-click. We're going to create an animator controller. We're going to call this humanoid, because we can use it for other things too that would resemble a person. We're going to go to the player, and we're going to drag the controller in the animator slot right there, like so. And now we're going to click on the animator tab. And now we're met with the animation tab. You guys, a lot of you, I'm sure you know how this works. First, we're going to go over to our parameters and add in the horizontal and vertical floats we put in the animator handler script. Perfect. Now we're going to go back to layers, right click here. We're going to create state from new blend tree. We're going to click on this, and we're going to call it Locomotion. And we're going to double click on this. We're going to click on the blend tree. So it's going to be a blend type 2D freeform, and we're going to use horizontal and vertical as our parameters. Add a motion field. First, we're going to want our idle, our animation when we're not moving. And then we're going to add another motion field, and we're going to want our walk animation. And lastly, we're going to add our running animation. Change that to 0. Put that on 0.5. And then the run on 1. If you guys are looking for animations, there are plenty of free animations you can get from Unity's asset store, especially animations for just running and walking. I will leave some in the description, but the ones I'm using in this video I probably won't leave because, again, I had to pay for these, so I don't think I can do that. Okay, let's come back to our scene here. Let's go up to the player locomotion script, and under update, we're going to add animator.handler update animation values, and we're going to put input handler dot move amount and 0. Save that. Minimize. Now we start it up. We should have a working character that runs with animations. And there we are. We can now run around with animations. If you guys made it this far, good job. Please drop a thumbs up on the video and subscribe for more. If you like the work I'm doing, I do have a Patreon. Be sure to check that out. The more pledges I get, the more videos I can make more frequently. I do have a couple more tutorial series planned too, but I will upload the next installment of this as soon as I can. But first, let's make a couple folders in here so we can organize everything so it's not so messy. Gonna throw all these scripts in a script folder there. Also gonna make another folder. Just gonna call that art. Gonna toss my player model and the animations and the material in there too. I will leave the Patreon and the assets linked in the description below. Thank you for watching. Let's say for some reason your animations won't play. This is a common problem because people sometimes forget to change their model to humanoid. So click in your model and in the inspector, on animation type, select humanoid and then click apply. This should solve the problem. So let's say you encounter the issue of your character is just not behaving right. The movement works, but he's spinning around the screen. He behaves very sporadically. It kind of might look something like this. Well, this is actually because your character might have apply root motion checked on. We don't want root motion for a movement. We want a movement done by code. So all you gotta do is go to your player model and under animator, uncheck apply root motion. This should stop any sporadic movement and return movement to normal, where it should move as intended.